Today we're going to look at the dew point and the relative humidity charts found on page 12 of your reference table. Both charts are used the same way, so we'll go through these together. To begin with, the dew point chart found at the top of the page. You'll notice in the title, it says dew point and the units, degrees Celsius, are given to you in parentheses. That's important to remember because we're always going to have units for dew point in degrees Celsius. Now, the way we work the chart is very easy if we look at the headings on the chart. Starting with what we see here on the left-hand column. It says dry bulb temperature in degrees Celsius. Dry bulb temperature is regular air temperature, and for your problem you would go down that column to whichever row corresponds to the temperature that you're looking to find. Now, as we look across the top, the heading reads difference between dry bulb and wet bulb temperatures. And remember, when we see the word difference, that always means subtraction. So, to get to the proper column, we would be taking our dry bulb temperature minus the wet bulb temperature. We always do it that way because you'll remember the wet bulb temperature is always a cooler or a lower temperature than the dry bulb. So it's always dry bulb minus wet bulb. Once you do that subtraction, then you go to whichever column has the heading for that subtracted value. Now I do want to point out, you want to be careful that you don't just count over the number of columns for, say, a difference of 2. If you count over 2 columns, your problem is you're going to wind up in 1 column short, because the first column is always for a difference of 0, as if the air temperature equaled the wet bulb temperature. Dry bulb equals wet bulb. So just remembering that, don't count over the number of columns. Always check your heading and make sure that heading matches whatever you're interested in finding. And then once we have a row for your dry bulb temperature and a column for your difference between the dry and the wet bulb, where they intersect will be the value for dew point. Let's try a sample question. All right? Now, first question. A parcel of air has a dry bulb temperature of 16 degrees Celsius and a wet bulb temperature of 10 degrees Celsius. What is the dew point? What are you looking to find out this time? You're looking to find out the dew point. It will be a value somewhere within the body of the chart. And we're going to hunt it down exactly the way we just said. We start by going to the dry bulb temperature. Dry bulb is going to be right here along the left-handmost column, and I go down to the row that matches my value of 16 degrees Celsius. That's going to be this row right here. All right? And let me just highlight that row, because whatever my answer, it's going to be somewhere along that row. Now, I go to difference between dry and wet bulb as I look at my headings across the top. Well, my wet bulb is 10 degrees Celsius. My dry bulb is 16, so my difference is 6 degrees Celsius. I go to the column headed 6. Let me just highlight that for you. Where those 2 columns intersect, that will be your answer. And where do they intersect? They intersect at this value of 4 degrees Celsius. So there's my answer, 4 degrees Celsius. Pretty straightforward. But what if we change it up a bit? What if we don't just have dry bulb and wet bulb temperatures given to us? We have 2 other pieces of information. We could still do it. Check out the next question. What is the wet bulb temperature when the dry bulb temperature is 20 degrees Celsius and the dew point temperature is 17 degrees Celsius? Now, this is a little bit different because what are we asked for? We're asked for the wet bulb temperature. We still have 2 important pieces of information. we have, well, let me clear off my table a little bit. Okay, we have the dry bulb temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. So, as long as we have that, you know we're going to go down that left-hand column. We're going to look for the row labeled 20. Okay, and anything that I'm interested in is going to be along that row. Okay. But now the other piece of information that I have is not difference, not wet bulb, but the dew point. So I'm going to look along that row that I highlighted, and I'm going to look for the dew point temperature they gave us, which was 17 degrees Celsius. As I look, I find it right here, 17 in my column for the difference between dry and wet bulb being 2. So that means my difference is 2 degrees Celsius. Well, what is wet bulb? I know that it is 2 degrees cooler than my dry bulb. So that means it's 20 degrees Celsius minus the 2 degrees Celsius, which gives me a wet bulb temperature of 18 degrees Celsius. We still use the information from the chart, but we're just approaching it a little different way when we have different information. Okay. So let's check the bottom of the page, and let's look at the relative humidity chart. Still, we see the same kind of setup. Title, relative humidity, and the units. So now you notice all of our units are in percent, because relative humidity is how full is the air of moisture, what percent full. We still see that the label dry bulb temperature will lead us down the left-hand column to the proper row of dry bulb temperature. And we still see that across the top, the difference between dry and wet bulb, when we subtract, will lead us to the proper column. Where they intersect will be our answer. So let's try a couple of questions based on relative humidity. Now my first question may look like a little bit of a trick, and it's not. Check it out. A parcel of air has a dry bulb temperature of 13 degrees Celsius and a wet bulb temperature of 9 degrees Celsius. What is the relative humidity? Okay, question. What is the relative humidity? Now, why am I saying it's a little bit trickier? Have you noticed that as we go down the dry bulb column, all the way on the left-hand side, every number is an even number. Does that mean we can't find odd numbers? No. It means we're going to be doing some estimating between the two even values either side of that number that we're interested in. So our dry bulb temperature is 13 degrees Celsius in this problem. That means I'm going to be keeping my eye on what's going on between the row and the values for a dry bulb of 12 degrees and the row and the values of a dry bulb of 14 degrees. So I think I'm just going to highlight the in-between position right here, because that's where we're going to keep our eyes. Now, the other thing we have is straight out wet bulb. And to find my proper column, I'm looking at the difference. So let's see, 13 degrees Celsius minus 9 degrees Celsius gives us a difference of 4 degrees. 4 degrees puts us in this column. We read down that 4-degree column, and where are we? We are between the values of 57 and 60. So, what's between 57 and 60? We could have a value of 58% or 59%. That's all. Pretty easy when you realize we're going to be looking at what's going on in between. Now again, sometimes it's not straight out dry bulb, wet bulb. What else can we see? Well, let's do one more sample problem. This next one reads, what is the dry bulb temperature? That's the first time now we've been asked for dry bulb. What is the dry bulb temperature when the relative humidity is 51% and the difference between wet and dry bulb temperatures is 3 degrees Celsius? So keep in mind what we're interested in. We're figuring out dry bulb temperature. Okay. What do we have? We have the difference between wet and dry bulb is 3 degrees Celsius. So 3 degrees is my difference. That's my column right here. So I'm going to highlight that column because I'm going to keep my eyes there. The other thing that can help me narrow down to a row is the value they give us of relative humidity. They're telling us the relative humidity is 51. As I check that column, here it is. Here's my relative humidity of 51. It is in the row for dry bulb temperature of 2 degrees Celsius. So what is your dry bulb temperature? 2 degrees Celsius. You hunt down the information you have, and you'll be able to supply what you need. It's really that straightforward. Good luck with it.